Okay, hello everyone. I am Dana Ben-Shahar, founder of Contacto Humano Organizacional. And I am very honored and grateful having Tal Ben-Shahar and Henrique Cymerman with us in this conversation about peace processes, happiness, and leadership. Adriana Cooper is a close friend of mine. She is a journalist. She writes in several media in Colombia. And she is also a teacher in one of the best schools of Colombia, the Teodoro Herzl. So Adriana, thanks for hosting this conversation and thanks for accepting also.
Thanks to you to be here. The idea here is to have a conversation about some topics that are interesting for us, for some people abroad in different countries. So I'm going to start to give an introduction to the people who is talking with us today. Dana Ben-Shahar is a social communicator and happiness coach. She's the founder of Contacto Humano Organizacional, with which she has been inspiring and teaching people and company development for more than 11 years. She has been happiness consultant, lecturer, and coach of the 3 of the 4 top Colombian multi-learning companies, according to 220's Merco metrics. She also has been part of the board of one of the best schools in Colombia for more than 10 years. In December 2020, Dana listened an interview of Henrique Cymerman about the new and real peace horizons, which she has been collaborating to open between Israel and United Arab States. And as a student of Tal Ben-Shahar about happiness and positive psychology, she came up with the idea to promote a conversation with both about what does it need to lead such endeavor as Henrique had committed to, and what has to do happiness in that kind of leadership. I'm going to introduce Henrique Cymerman Ben-Shahar. Henrique is a famous journalist, Israeli, native from Portugal and Spain. He's Middle East news correspondent, and he publishes his work in 5 languages: Hebrew, Spanish, English, Portuguese, and French. He studied in Tel Aviv University social science and had a master in political science and sociology. He is a former teacher at the same university. He had covered the Middle East relationship for more than 25 years, building trust with the main leaders of the Arabic world and Israel. His close relationship allowed him to act as a bridge between the conversations about the Arab-Israeli conflict. He's the last person who interviewed Isaac Rabin. He's also the author of the book Voices of the Center of the World, in which he interviewed many Arabic and Israeli leaders about their points of view about the conflict. He has a close relationship with His Holiness Pope Francisco, and thanks to that, Henrique was the jester and the author of the visit to Israel of the Pope. He also promoted the meeting in Vatican between Shimon Peres and Mahmoud Abbas with the Pope. He also co-wrote the book Francis from Rome to Jerusalem. Last year, he told us that he founded in secret the industry and commerce chamber between the Persian Gulf countries and Israel after the relationship building between Israel and the United Arab States. And I'm going to end this presentation with Tal Ben-Shahar. He's an Israeli and American teacher and writer in positive psychology and leadership. Tal received his PhD in organizational behavior from Harvard University. His dissertation was titled Restoring Self-Esteem, the Constructs of Dependent and Independent Competence and Worth. He has a bachelor's degree from Harvard in philosophy and psychology. His undergrad thesis is titled Honesty Pays, Bridging the Gap Between Moral Theory and Practice. He's one of the most prominent teachers of positive psychology and leadership around the world. He had over 800 students in his classes at Harvard University, so he became the most popular teacher in Harvard history. He is also a prolific author and lecturer in multinational companies and general public, talking about happiness, education, ethics, innovation, resilience, goal setting, self-esteem, and mindfulness. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's co-founder and chief learning officer of Happiness Studies Academy, Potential Life, Native and Happy TV. His book, Happier and Being Happy, has been translated into 25 languages. So it's an honor for me to be with you today.
Thank you, Adriana. Thank you.
Dana, would you like to give us a frame of the topic of this conversation today?
Sure. Thanks, Adriana. Let's begin defining what happiness is. There are still misunderstandings about the concept. When we speak about happiness, we do not mean a permanent high, emotional high state like excitement. In fact, we shouldn't define happiness with an emotional word. As I explain in my lectures, we can be happy and being sad at the very same moment. Happiness is about a whole being, meaning a systemic relationship between spirituality, which is beyond religions, mind-body connection, intellectual dimension as curiosity and openness to new experiences, meaningful relationships, and emotional agency, meaning permission to be human, as Tal says. Harvard has been studying happiness for over more than 75 years, and their conclusion is relationships are the number one predictor of happiness, period. That's the sentence that Robert Baldinger, its director, said. When it comes to meaningful relationships, we understand not only the ones with our loved ones, but with anyone we can feel a positivity resonance. Meaningful relationships could have different meanings for each of us, but probably we can agree in some words to define it. Respect, kindness, care, interest, trust, real, is, close. To build meaningful relationships with others, we must build the first and main relationship of all, with ourselves. Robert Baldinger says that to build meaningful relationships is a way of self-care, as it is doing exercise or eating healthy. For many years, I've been truly passionate about life purpose and passion, which are part of the spiritual dimension of the whole being, or the science of happiness. I think that finding our purpose in life and living through our passions helps a lot to build meaningful relationships. When people are true, are honest toward themselves, they become more open, kinder, more purposeful, and more caring about others. In other words, when we are true and aligned with ourselves, or as some scholars say, self-concordant, the likelihood of positivity resonance with anyone increases. Positivity resonance is an expression that Barbara Fredrickson uses defining love with a more open and less romantic view in her book Love 2.0. And I dare to say that to build peace, economic growth, sustainability, happiness, and high performance in each family, social, businesses, corporate, and governmental environment, positivity resonance is a necessity. So, Adriana, let me begin with the first question. Enrique, according to your experiences between old enemies governments and Tal, according with your experiences with multinational and Fortune 500 companies, what is needed to build a positivity resonance conversation in leadership? Enrique, you can go first if you want.
Wow, this is a tough question, but I think I can resume my answer with one word: trust. I think there is a historical lack of trust that complicated all the ways to bring people together. There are objective conflicts for territories, for difference of perceptions about the future, about how the geography should be built of the country, about the existence of the state of Israel, if it's acceptable or not for some of our enemies. But you know, I remember for me, the ground zero was when I just arrived to Israel, and I was a kid, I was very young, studying in the university, and President Sadat arrived to Israel. That specific moment showed that sometimes there are moments where you can change so many stereotypes in seconds. You can kill so many thoughts that were there for years, for decades. And suddenly you see something like this. You know, that was an incredible moment when he landed in the Lod airport, today the Ben Gurion airport. That was an incredible moment because people don't know, but when he landed here in the Israeli army, there was a mistrust. The Sayeret Matkal unit, which is an elite unit, was organized around the plane because they thought that would be a kind of terror attack against all the elite of the state of Israel. Not Sadat would come, but an elite unit from the other side. Imagine the mistrust of so many years. And they were there, prepared for any case. It's incredible. And he came. And I think history started a new path after this visit and after his speech in Jerusalem. I want to hear Tal too, but I will tell you one story that shows this feeling very deeply. The Egyptian ambassador in Israel, the last 4 years, he told me, he arrived here in 2016, and he told me he felt his heart the moment he was reaching Israel, like he was having a heart attack. And then he said to me, and that happened to me decades after the peace agreement between us. Now, I know, he said to me, something that was never published. And he gave me a scoop. One of the advisors of President Sadat had a heart attack in the plane when they were landing in Israel. He felt very bad. And Sadat said, I don't want this to be revealed, this to be published, because I want this to be a big party. I want this to really have an impact on the public opinion. So they took the gentleman to Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. He died there, and it was never published. So again, what is needed? First of all, we need to have trust. And psychology here is vital to reach agreements between countries and between people that are fighting for so many years in the oldest conflict on earth, I believe, today.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah, so Henrique, I could not agree more. I think trust is fundamental. And the interesting question, of course, for psychologists is how do you cultivate that trust? And I want to refer to some studies within psychology that can shed a light on this. So it's interesting, whether it's a coincidence or not, I don't know, but two scholars, one Muslim, one Jewish, came up with this idea. So back in the 1950s, Muzaffar Sharif introduced the idea of superordinate goal, and later Elliot Aronson introduced the idea of a jigsaw puzzle, basically talking about the same thing. You see, until the 1950s, it was widely held that in order to bring two conflicting groups together, to help reduce the stereotypes, to help build trust, to create a common ground, what you need to do was get them in touch with one another, get them to be in contact with one another. It was called by Gordon Allport and other psychologists the contact hypothesis. But what was found later on and has been replicated time and time again in research is that actually the contact in and of itself is not enough. That actually just bringing together two conflicting sides will, in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, only raise the conflict, will only increase stereotypes, will not lead to trust, but very often to mistrust, just having the contact. And what Muzaffar Sharif and later Elliot Aronson showed was that in order to create trust, in order to build healthy relationships, positivity resonance, if you will, Dana, what you need to do is create a superordinate goal. A superordinate goal is a goal that is common to both sides and is dependent for its success on both sides, meaning no one can do it alone. You need one another. You're dependent, you're interdependent. And when you have the superordinate goals that requires both sides to be involved, that is when over time you develop trust. That is when over time you build a strong and healthy relationships. And this is why, when I think about the Arab-Israeli conflict, for me, the most important thing is, yes, to get together and then to work on things where we're interdependent, where we need one another for success. Whether it's with the UAE today, whether it's in order to create a warmer peace with both Jordan and Egypt, and whether it's in the future to create peace with the Palestinians and the rest of the Arab and Muslim world. We need a superordinate goal. This is how you build trust. This is how you create positivity resonance.
Amazing. I'm thinking about specific situations I saw with my own eyes of informal or formal negotiation. Since the Madrid Peace Conference in 1991, I was there, and recently in non-formal, informal meetings between Israelis and UAE, Bahrainis, Saudis, Qataris, Omanis, etc. And I'm trying to translate into politics, international politics, exactly what you're saying. And I would define it as creating win-win situations where everybody can take something from there, and they have a personal, they may have a personal national interest to accomplish that challenge. So, and I think if we concentrate on that, we can get some results. The day of the signing of the peace agreement, the Abraham Accords in the White House, I was invited later to come to the Dubai national TV, Dubai One TV. First Israeli speaking in the TV, but before that, I was at home with my 3 kids watching the ceremony. And I told them, as someone who has been personally involved in this rapprochement, consider it a present of my generation to yours.
Wow.
And I told that on TV later. And, everybody was talking that evening, plenty of people who were doing a kind of analysis of the situation. And they all were so technical. The moment I said this, I think all the mood changed. It was amazing. You could see that they saw this agreement in a completely different dimension. It's not only interests, it's not only a pragmatic decision, it's something that should be done for the future and for those we care about, our kids and our grandkids, that one day will be there too. So it's interesting. I think we should have more people like you, Tal and Dana, involved in peace negotiations. things would be much better. And I say always, also more women, you know. I think women know much better how to handle these things. Men are like kids with toys. They go and they are very, very direct. It's completely different. Many times women are able to bring another dimension to the contacts, to the personal contacts.
Thank you, Henrique.
Sounds good. So I'm going to start for the first question. This question is for Tal. Tal, I'm curious. What is to be a servant leader? What does it mean?
You know, the idea of a servant leadership came through the work of Robert Greenleaf, and that was back in the 1970s, when he was looking for sort of the holy grail, or the most important element of extraordinary leadership. And of course, extraordinary leadership is required to bring peace. This is what we saw with Sadat and with Begin. Extraordinary leadership is necessary for running successful businesses as well. And what Robert Greenleaf identified in all the extraordinary leaders that he studied throughout history was that that they were servants, or they saw themselves as servants. And he went all the way back to the Jewish Bible. And look at Moses. You know, whether you look at the story as real or as a metaphor, it doesn't matter. But Moses was chosen by God when he chased a lamb that was running away from the flock. He served his flock, and God said, he can also serve my people. Fast forward to the Christian Bible. What was Jesus? A servant leader. He came to serve the people. You know, fast forward to the 20th century, Mahatma Gandhi was a servant of the people. Nelson Mandela, good example, because when he came out of prison after 27 years on Robben's Island, and he had time to think about what he would say to the people of South Africa. He had time to prepare that speech, right? Here is what he said. Looking at the cameras, he said, I am your servant. You look at business leaders as well, you know, whether it's the Jack Welches of the world or the Anita Roddick's of the world, they serve their employees. Anita Roddick serves, Mother Earth, her customers, and so on. And the number one characteristics of servant leaders is their ability to listen. Not to give rousing speeches, not to be the charismatic leader that stands and declares victory. It's to listen. You know, it's no coincidence that Moses in the Bible stutters. He has difficulty speaking. Why? Because again, whether you take it at face value or as a metaphor, God chose someone who could listen much more so than talk. And I think this is what we need to do. You know, also going back, Henrique, to trust. How do you build trust? By listening, by being present to what the other person wants, needs, expresses. This is servant leadership.
That's beautiful and also very interesting for our close relationships. Thanks, Tal. I'm curious, when I'm listening to Henrique, when you were interviewing these leaders from the Middle East for your book, Voices from the Center of the World, what were you listening to? Were you focused on something special?
Mm-hmm. You know, Adriana, there were really tough moments because sometimes I interviewed people who could kill my children, like leaders of Hamas or of Islamic Jihad, or literally, by the way, because in some cases it happened after attacks against someone. In my son's school, for instance, one of his friends was killed in buying a falafel in Herzliya in 2002. And the day after, I went to see Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, who was the founder and leader of Hamas. And I knew that he gave the order to do that attack. So it's amazing. I mean, how you must, in a way, act like a doctor that must treat someone, even if he's an enemy, and even if he's a terrorist, his obligation is to save his life. So sometimes I was trying to remind myself that I'm not there to judge him. I'm not a judge. I'm a journalist, so I'm trying to bring, to understand who is this guy that may be a monster for many of us, but who is he and what does he represent, and what should I learn about him? So it's very tough. It happened to me many times, also with the Islamic, with Daesh, with the Islamic State people, ISIS. In Iraq, I've been 4 times there, covering the war and filming really in the front and interviewing people from Daesh. And well, I mean, if I want to judge them, I just will look at them and I will lose them immediately. They will close themselves. But if I want to hear what is he representing, what is he defending, I must have a certain attitude. So it's tough. It's tough. But if you ask me in general, and not only about this kind of people, because I also interviewed big leaders in the world, I always try to ask things that nobody asks. I say I try to enlighten darker corners. I like to go to places that normally are not a typical thing, the typical cliche that everybody speaks about. And I try to find and to discover who is this lady or this man that is in front of me and what does he represent, really. And it's not easy. But you know, I had the chance that I had an incredible grandfather. And I was when I was a kid, I used to come and visit him every day in a very critical age. And you know, he would ask me every day, by the way, what good question did you do this today? Mm-hmm. Not what did you study, but what good question. And I don't think he was aware of the influence that would have on my career. But yes, it's tough to Tal spoke before to be a good listener, and I say it's also complicated to know what questions we must ask.
Enrique,
yes,
Adriana, let me say something. So to build trust, to have a success interview, it is a requirement, not judgment, not to be judgmental. So when you are not in a judgment state, where are you? May I answer my own question and you?
Sure, you should. I feel you have the answer.
We are in the same field of commune humanity. So we are all human. It relates to me a lot with positivity resonance, with permission to use this word, with love, but not love as we are taught. It's love about like positivity resonance. We are all human. We join, we meet in the same field when we are not judgmental. Are you agree? Or what do you think?
Well, I think, look, it will take me time to reach a conclusion on that. I think, yes, we are all human, for sure. And even when I sit with someone like this, look, I remember moments, for instance, I did a documentary. I've been a week on jail, in a jail called Hasharon jail, where you had there men and women and kids, by the way, lots of adolescents, who did all kind or tried to do all kind of suicide operations. Sometimes we had kids there, 13, 14, 15 years old, who some of them killed people with their own hands. And I was sitting with them for a week in jail and filming them and interviewing them. I felt sorry for them. And maybe the humanity here, the humanity side, I was comparing between them and my own kids. And I said, my kids were the lucky ones. And they, to reach that situation, probably they got a very difficult life, a very difficult influence, and monsters teach them to become what they became, mainly when they were so young, 13, 14, 15. I'm sure humanity is important. I'm sure it happens. But you know, Dana, when you're in a way fighting for your life, or even more, for the life of the people you love, it becomes very complicated.
Absolutely.
And I would like to add a layer of complication.
Thank you, Tal.
That's our expertise, huh, Tal?
That's right. You know, in the in Jewish tradition, there is an emphasis on two concepts. The concepts are mercy and justice. Rachamim v'tzedek. And mercy is important and justice is important, because if you only have one and not the other, then you are compromising on your humanity. Because if you only have mercy towards murderers or people in general who hurt others, what you're doing is you're spreading hatred and you're spreading evil. On the other hand, if there is justice without mercy, well, then you're a heartless machine, capable of doing a great deal of harm. You need to have both elements, mercy and justice. To understand, you know, a person's humanity, and yet at the same time to put boundaries so that they don't hurt others' humanity.
Yeah, because forgiven is not allowing them to continue with such behavior. It's two different things. Yeah.
Both are important.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely agree.
Yes, I would like to ask you, which skills should have a person to negotiate? What do you think is necessary to a person to have in order to negotiate with others?
Well, Tal said before one of them that is really critical, which is being able to listen. Most of the people come and they are so concerned with their own speech, with their own thing that they want to bring, that they simply don't listen. And it happens also to many journalists that come with a list of questions, and sometimes they get incredible answers and they don't even refer to that because they continue with their own program. I think listening, it's the main thing, and trying to develop a real answer to those questions, to those concerns. This is the first thing that you must have. And also being able to see reality, not only with your paradigms, with your way of listening, trying to put yourself in the situation of your counterpart.
If I could add just a couple of things to those which I of course think are critical for a successful negotiation. The one is I want to draw on Socrates. So Socrates, considered by many to be the father of Western philosophy, was encountered by some of his students who said to him, you know, we asked the Oracle of Delphi, and the Oracle of Delphi was that place or entity that knew everything, so to speak. We asked them who was the smartest person in Athens, and the Oracle of Delphi said, you, Socrates, you are the smartest person, the most clever in Athens. And Socrates thought about it for a few seconds, and then he said, yeah, I actually agree with that. I agree with that because I know that I know nothing. And that is what makes me the smartest person in Athens. So, you know, on the one hand, you know, it seemed arrogant, but on the other hand, it's the most humble thing you can say. And I think this is what we need to do when we encounter negotiations, not to go in with an arrogant mindset. I know what's right. I know what the solution and the resolution is, but rather to go in with a clean slate as much as possible, and to say, I don't know. And Henrique, this goes back to your asking questions and learning about the other side, the needs, their desires, where are they coming from? And then with that, coming to a conclusion, and hopefully a conclusion that supports, provides the needs of both sides. But it's going in with an open mind, which of course is connected to listening, and going in with a humble, modest mindset.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
You introduced me to the following question, that is, how to reach agreements with people who are very far from our thoughts.
Well, peace you do with enemies. So normally they are very far from our thoughts. But I think I'll give you the specific case, that we are living now in the Middle East. I think we are living a huge revolution. And people are not aware of how deep it is. I've been involved in this for 10 years, and I can tell you that I was expecting this. This was my really big dream, but I didn't think it would happen so fast. And I believe the next years are going to be challenging, are going to be amazing in that point of view. And what was the reason? Okay, I asked many people in the Arab countries and also here in Israel. Well, everybody knows the fact we have common enemies. We have Iran. When you are in the Gulf and you see the lights from the other side of the Gulf, this is Iran. It's 15 minutes from there. So you understand that they are very concerned with that, very worried, and they know that Israel is threatened by them, by the Iranians too. So there is a common interest here, a common threat, a common fear, if you want. Also with the world jihad groups that threaten them and threaten us, like Al-Qaeda or like ISIS, etc. There is something very interesting they said to me. They said to me that already in 1973, they understood there is no military option against Israel. So if you can't beat him, join him. So in a way, they said to me that they understood the Israelis arrived to the war, to the Yom Kippur War, on their knees, but 5 weeks later, they won. And somebody said something very strong. He said to me, Israel is the most powerful country between Indonesia and Gibraltar. Then there is technology. They understand that Israel, being a small country, 9 million people, 72 years in a huge conflict, as I said before, the longest, I think, on earth today, Israel developed a startup ecosystem of high-tech companies with more companies in NASDAQ than the 27 countries of the EU, European Union altogether. Now, I must tell you also the UAE, they have remarkable achievements. They launched in 2020 the probe Hope to Mars. They are going to land now in Mars in February. They are going to have astronauts in the moon. But they see all this together and they say, we can do incredible things. I remember a prince, a Saudi prince, I can say, who told me, imagine what we can do with your intelligence and our finance power. So it's quite amazing. Then there is something else that is happening that I think it's critical here. And that's the fact that when you go to these countries in the Gulf, for instance, you see mostly young people. 70% of the population are under 30. And they want a different future. They say, we should not carry the baggage of the past. Enough is enough. We should do something else. There are initiatives now of youngsters from both sides organizing visits in this stage via Zoom, but then they will do exactly to host each other. They will try to host each other. And it's amazing to see young people, dressed like Bedouins in the Gulf, men and women, and Israeli youngsters talking together and trying and finding a common ground. It's amazing. And I don't want to take all the time, so I will tell you a last thing that I think that had an incredible influence in the Middle East, and it's going to have in the near future, which is COVID-19. I think coronavirus, in a way, won't be over anywhere until it's over everywhere. And it reminded to all of us that we are in the same boat. So I can tell you, only some minutes ago, somebody very high level from Abu Dhabi said to me, look, we want to cooperate fighting virus in general and coronavirus especially. We want to cooperate with Israeli companies. So these are, I would say, the main reasons, the common platform that brought this historical decision and this moment that we are living now.
And if I can just make a connection, Henrique, to what we spoke about at the beginning, how do you bring peace? You create a superordinate goal. And what you have been describing are a number of superordinate goals. Let's fight the virus together. Yeah, well, there's also, a common enemy that's out there. That's a superordinate goal. And there are also common grounds along our humanity, which is, Dana, what you spoke about earlier. And I want to say a few more words to elaborate on that. So about 15 years ago or so, there was a grand meeting in India where the Dalai Lama and his top brass, as well as leading Western scientists, came together. And they spent a week together talking about the latest research on dealing with what they coined destructive emotions, like hatred and anger or anxiety or depression. It was a week where the researchers from the West and researchers from the East could present their findings. And it was, I think, somewhere around the third day after the Dalai Lama has heard, many presentations. He asked for an audience and, of course, received it. And he said, this has been wonderful, really. I've learned so much, and this is so interesting. But I'm a little bit concerned. And he said, my concern is that we have spent 3 days talking largely about cultural differences. And this is the East versus the West. This is what you see in Africa. This is what you see in Europe. And he said, we talked about different elements of humanity. And he said, I think it's very important to talk about cultural differences. However, we mustn't miss the main point, which is that we're much more alike than we're different. And that was, of course, a game changer for the next few days, where they talked about our common humanity. And what is our common humanity? Our common humanity is that we all strive for love and connection, and that we all want a better world for our children, and that we all have certain needs for meaning, for relationships, for learning, for growing. And this is common. And, Dana knows this very well. This is what we teach in the Happiness Studies Academy. When we talk about happiness, we're talking about cultural differences as well, but mostly, we talk about the common ground, that we're all looking for a sense of meaning and purpose in life, that we all strive for better health, that we're all looking to grow and to learn, that we all need and require and want relationships and love, and that we all are sometimes sad or angry or feeling hate or envy and love and gratitude and joy. And to me, I have a dream, to quote someone. And my dream is to teach happiness, to teach the same ideas in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt and Jordan, as I teach in Israel and in Brazil and in the United States and in Kenya, and to teach these ideas. And through these ideas, people will better understand, hopefully, common humanity. And this is the common ground where we can bring together people who right now seemingly are on opposite extremes.
Exactly.
Talking about a common ground, I would like to ask about ethics. What do you think is the role of ethics in happiness, negotiations, relationships? How does it play here?
The role of
Ethics.
ethics. Well, you know, I believe ethics should be there. I hope they are sometimes, but you know, I think unfortunately that many times common interests are the DNA, the solid basis for agreements like this, more than ethics. Even if sometimes you see people bringing ethics to the table, which is also important. Look, the question is, I was listening very carefully to Tal. The question is, we know there are plenty of spoilers, of people who are against all kind of agreements, like the agreements we are living now. We know some people are now, as we speak, thinking how to destroy them, how to find a way to, you know, to prove once again that normally pessimists are right. And I hope they will not be able this time. The big question is, are we maybe crossing the point of non-return and will be able to build a new narrative of hope, to reshape alliances? You know, with the Pope, I have Pope Francis. He's an incredible gentleman. You were talking about the Dalai Lama before, and I was thinking about him, many of the things he could tell. One day he asked me something after the visit to Israel and to Palestine and Jordan. I helped to organize the prayer for peace between Abu Mazen and Shimon Peres. And after that, he was really euphoric. He was really happy with that. It was one of the moments that I saw him really enthusiastic. And he said to me, Henrique, let me ask you one question. If you have all the money of the world, what do you do to try to change the future of the next generation, to improve it, to build a narrative of hope in the Middle East, in the world? And, you know, I have the feeling that the bad guys are there and they are going to be there. But the question is, and I tell it to my Muslim friends and brothers in every forum that I speak in, I tell them, are you going to be able to tell them you're not with them? Can we have an alliance between the people in the different civilizations? You must be closer to me than you are to those guys, to those radical, extreme guys in the Muslim world. So you should isolate them also, as we should isolate our radical people, our negative people in the three civilizations. If we are able to create this alliance, because it's about our future we're talking about, maybe we have a chance. And that's why I'm so happy with what I'm seeing with my eyes now in the Middle East.
Amazing, Henrique.
You know, if I can just say a few words about ethics, you know, for me, my most important learning in the field of ethics came from my professor and mentor, Joseph Badaracco, who teaches at Harvard Business School. And Joseph Badaracco says, when we talk about ethics, he says, we're not necessarily talking about right versus wrong decisions. He says right versus wrong decisions are easy. You know, are you nice to someone or do you hurt someone? You know, that's an easy choice. He says the difficult ethical dilemmas are not between right and wrong, but rather between right and right. And in politics, we so often encounter right versus right decisions. For example, do you go to war? Going to war is very often a right versus right decision. Because if you don't go to war, well, maybe things will get worse in the future, and you're allowing evil forces to strengthen. But if you do go to war, you'll inevitably hurt innocent people. There was not a war in history where innocent people were not hurt. So this is a right versus right decision. Do you go to war or do you not go to war? In terms of, taxes, it's a right versus right decision. But its essence is right versus right, because, you want to support, it's right to support society as a whole. It's also right to give people access to their hard-earned income rather than take it away from them. Right versus right. You're always making right versus right decisions. These are the difficult decisions. Also, when you wage peace, there is no perfect peace treaty. Both sides always have to give up something. It's a right versus right decision. Now, to make right versus right decisions, that entails, first of all, accepting the fact that it's imperfect, that there is no perfect solution. Second, it's about being humble rather than being arrogant and saying we can find a solution that both sides will be extremely happy with. Yes, we want a win-win, and yet there will also be some losing on both sides. And finally, it's about taking time. Making right versus right decisions is not easy. And we need time for reflection. We need time for contemplation. We need time for conversation. We need to listen. We need to ask questions. And through that all, we can come up to the optimal solution. Not perfect, optimal. Optimal means best given the constraints of reality.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tal. We are going to talk about economy very soon. I'm really curious. Enrique mentioned the Pope. It's not very common for a person to say that he's a friend of the Pope. And I would like to ask to Enrique if he can tell us a little bit about this friendship. How did you become a close friend to the Pope? And if you want to tell us maybe a few characteristics or things that you admire on him.
I tell him normally I'm a Bergoglian Jew because I like his perception. He's a humble person. I think he would answer the same thing the Dalai Lama, Socrates answered about himself. He knows nothing. He's, first of all, he's a human being. And it's amazing, when you are the Pope and you are considered in a way God by millions of people, the representative of God on earth. It's not easy to be a normal human being. Now, my story with him is really strange because I was not aware of that, but he knew me from the media in Argentina. Not because of me, but because of Israeli news. He used to follow the news from Israel for many, many years. And I used to work in Antena 3, which is one of the main channels in Spanish, and they broadcast also in South America. So he used to watch my reports, and he sent one of his best friends, Rabbi Skorka, a rabbi from Buenos Aires, to a lecture of mine in Argentina. Well, it's a long story, but it was really bizarre. I mean, one day a gentleman comes to a lecture and said to me, the rabbi, my best friend became the Pope, and he likes you very much. And he wants to invite you to the Vatican. When I told that to my wife, Yael, she thought I was with a very strong jet lag. So she said, oh, poor me. You're really in a bad shape. You're very tired. And finally, we found ourselves there. And he gave me the first interview ever on camera. But then the most important thing was when he took me to a living room together with Rabbi Skorka, and he said, Enrique, what can I do for Israel and for the Middle East?
Wow.
And I felt like my legs trembling, But lucky me, I had the idea to tell him, please come, that you should come. That should be your first visit as Pope. That was three months after his election as Pope. So he said to me, do you help me to organize the visit? And I told him, Papa Francisco, you don't need my help. You have here everyone. So, but if you want, I'm available. And that was, you know, famous last words. Since then, I had dozens of mails personally from the Pope, not his assistants, calls. The first time he called me by phone, I thought it was an Argentinian friend who wanted to laugh on me. So he said, hola, soy Papa Francisco. And I answered, sí, yo soy Napoleón. And finally it was, you know, he laughed. And now he's a little bit sad with all this situation of coronavirus. And I think I'm going to see him very soon. After I used to see him 5-6 times a year, but recently, well, it became almost impossible. But I'm going to be there very soon.
Great, thank you.
Very, very funny, Enrique. The story is longer and it has more funny.
Yeah, it has. But we don't have the time to this time. Maybe next time.
Dana, Tal, and Enrique, thank you so much for this interesting conversation. It's really meaningful what you said. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adriana.
It was a huge pleasure, really.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Tal. I appreciate a lot your time, your insights. Truly, I am very grateful.
Hope to see you very soon, face to face, and not only in Zoom. Okay?
Me too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Adriana, Tal, and Dana. Bye. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
What a pleasure to hear you. What an honor to be with you here.
Please.
Please.
So
Now we can tell them we are cousins.
Yeah.
Okay.